The more you search for the truth, the further it runs from you. It's strange, isn't it? How we come to these quiet moments at night, eyes closed, body still, but the mind refuses to sleep. It wants something, an answer, a pattern, a reason. You try to slow down, but your thoughts don't. You try to let go, but even that becomes something to control. You want peace, but you chase it, and somehow that chase pulls you further from it. It's like trying to fall asleep while wondering how to fall asleep. The loop tightens, the paradox deepens, and reality begins to shimmer around the edges. But maybe that's where we begin tonight. Right here in the center of that shimmer between logic and longing, because paradoxes aren't just puzzles. They're mirrors. They show us what happens when the mind reaches its limits, and the soul starts to speak. So in this space, soft, slow, undemanding, we'll walk together through 15 paradoxes. Not to fix them, not to solve them, but to breathe with them, to fall with them, to wonder gently what they might be whispering back. If that feels like home to you, like a space you've been searching for, go ahead and like this video and subscribe for more lucid, whispered truths. And tell me in the comments if you'd like, what thought keeps you up at night? Now close your eyes, take one breath deeper than usual, and follow the thread. Let's begin. You've spent most of your life trying to hold it all together: schedules, emotions, relationships, even your own thoughts. There's a part of you that believes if you could just organize it all, if you could just keep everything in place, then maybe, just maybe, you'd finally feel safe. You double check, you overthink, you rehearse conversations before they happen. And when life spins, you try to spin faster, thinking you can outpace the chaos. But here's the strange part. The more you try to control everything, the more out of control you feel. You try to hold on and the rope burns your hands. You plan every detail and the anxiety multiplies. You build walls to protect your peace but find yourself imprisoned inside them. It's exhausting, isn't it? The need for control is not weakness. It's a survival strategy. Somewhere in your past, maybe early, maybe not, there was a moment when things spun out and no one came to stabilize the world for you. No one made sense of the chaos. No one helped you breathe through the unknown. So you decided unconsciously that if no one else would make you feel safe, you would. You became your own container. You became the one who watches plans, adjusts, predicts. You called it being responsible. You called it being prepared. But beneath it was fear. Fear of collapse. Fear of being helpless again. In psychology, this is often linked to a defense called hypervigilance. The nervous system is always scanning for threat. The ego thinks its job is to keep you safe by managing every possible outcome. But here's the deeper layer. It's not just about keeping things in order. It's about keeping you from falling apart. The child inside you still believes, if I don't control this, I'll disappear. That's what's really being protected. Not the plan, not the spreadsheet, not the perfect version of your life, but a fragile sense of self that never got to feel safe enough to surrender. Carl Jung once said, "You do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Sometimes the darkness is your fear of letting go. You've spent so long building structure, you've forgotten how to rest. Letting go isn't just uncomfortable. It feels like death to the ego. So instead, you grip harder. You tighten the sail when the storm comes. But paradoxically, that tension makes the ship capsize even faster. Think of water. The tighter you hold it in your hand, the faster it slips through your fingers. But if you cup your palm gently, it stays. Control is like that. It's not something to crush into submission. It's something to hold loosely with awareness. The philosopher Alan Watts called this the backwards law. The idea that the more you pursue something, the more you reinforce that you don't have it. Trying to control life reinforces the belief that life is unsafe. Trying to be certain only confirms how much you doubt. This isn't about giving up. It's about unhooking from the illusion that control equals safety. Because safety, real safety, doesn't come from dominance. It comes from trust. Trust in your own resilience. Trust in the flow of time. Trust that you are not defined by what happens, but by how you meet it. In Adlerian psychology, every action we take, even the anxious, controlling ones, are attempts to serve a goal. Not a goal of logic, but a goal of meaning. Maybe your goal has been prove that I'm capable. Make sure nothing surprises me. Prevent abandonment. Earn love through perfection. The problem isn't the strategy. It's that the goal might no longer serve who you're becoming. What if your new goal was different? Trust the unfolding. Let life co-author the script. Know myself beyond circumstance. That would change everything. Let's step out even further. Imagine Earth spinning. Billions of people breathing, moving, growing, weather shifting, seasons unfolding. None of it is under your control. And yet, somehow you're still here, still breathing, still carried by gravity and mourning and memory. The planet doesn't ask for your grip. It turns on its own, and maybe so can you. There's an image that returns often in dreams. A tightrope walker high above the ground balancing between two cliffs. Below them fear, above them silence. At first glance they seem in control, but the secret of balance is not tension, it's trust. Every step is a surrender to the next. Control in its deepest form isn't about gripping tighter, it's about dancing with the unknown. One slow step, then another. So if you find yourself tonight trying to plan your way out of rest, trying to calculate tomorrow before it begins, trying to rehearse every possibility just to feel okay, pause. Let yourself float for a moment. Let your thoughts wander without anchoring them. Let your breath move in and out without judgment. You are not holding the universe together, and you don't have to. Soft question to close this chapter. What would happen if you stopped gripping so tightly? Would everything fall apart? Or would something new finally begin? There's a certain ache that comes with trying too hard. You've felt it, haven't you? That quiet desperation hidden beneath smiles. That invisible pressure to show up to be impressive, to make sure you're enough. And the more you try to be enough, the more it feels like you never are. The paradox of effort is that the harder you try to be liked, to be wanted, to be chosen, the more you can feel like a stranger to yourself. Because when every gesture becomes a performance, who are you when no one is watching? This isn't just about approval, it's about survival. Somewhere along the way, your worth became conditional. Maybe it was subtle. A parent who praised you only when you achieved. A teacher who noticed you only when you excelled. A friend who withdrew the moment you stopped entertaining. So you learned. You learned to try, to impress, to anticipate what people wanted and become it. It looked like kindness, like charisma, like strength. But underneath, it was a defense. Psychologists call it fawning, a response rooted in the nervous system's need to avoid rejection. It's not manipulation. It's not weakness. It's the child in you saying, if I'm pleasing, I'll be safe. If I disappear behind your needs, you won't leave. If I shapeshift, maybe you'll love the version of me that doesn't feel so broken. And so, you try. You overcompensate. You overdeliver. You say yes when you mean no. You smile when your soul is tired. All to avoid the unbearable weight of being unwanted. The philosopher Alfred Adler believed that all human behavior moves toward a goal, and often our goal underneath the surface is belonging. But here's the twist. True belonging only happens when you're fully yourself, not when you're trying to earn your place. Trying too hard creates a contradiction. You want connection, but you're presenting a filtered self. The more effort you put into being likable, the more you betray your own authenticity. And people can feel that. Even if they can't name it, they sense it. That something isn't grounded, that something is off. And that dissonance can push them away, which only makes you try harder. It becomes a loop. Effort, disconnection, more effort, more disconnection. The harder you chase acceptance, the more it slips through your fingers. There's a concept in Taoist philosophy called wu-wei effortless action. The idea is not that you do nothing, but that your actions are aligned with nature, not forced, not strained. The river doesn't try to flow, it just flows. The flower doesn't try to bloom, it just does. When you're in wu-wei, your presence speaks louder than your performance. You are not a resume, you are not a checklist, you are not a highlight reel of achievements. You are enough in stillness. And if someone can't feel your worth in stillness, they were never seeing you at all. Think about the people you've admired most, not the loudest, not the most polished, but the ones who felt like home. They weren't trying to be liked, they were simply being. And in their groundedness, you felt safe enough to be real too. That's the gift of authenticity. It creates space for others to relax into their own. You don't have to grip the conversation. You don't have to prove your depth. You don't have to curate your every word. You just have to be where you are and let the rest unfold. There's a dream logic that appears in the soul of the over-efforter. You find yourself running through a field trying to catch a glowing butterfly. It glimmers with every step. And just as you reach out, it disappears. You collapse in the grass exhausted. But then something strange happens. When you stop chasing, it lands softly on your shoulder. That's the paradox. The thing you were seeking arrives when you stop grasping. Carl Jung wrote about the importance of integrating the shadow, the hidden parts of ourselves we disown. Sometimes the shadow is the part of us that's tired, the one that's done trying, the one that wants to be loved in silence, not performance. But we hide that part. We're afraid it's not lovable. We think the world only wants the smiling, polished, ambitious version of us. But what if the shadow, the quiet, awkward, unpolished self, is actually the most magnetic? Not because it's perfect, but because it's real. So tonight, maybe you can let yourself fall back. Not into effort, but into ease. Breathe without adjusting your posture, lie still without strategizing. Let go of how you should be perceived. You are not here to convince anyone of your worth. And if the silence feels unbearable, if it feels like something is missing without the performance, that's okay. That's just your nervous system recalibrating. Let it be awkward. Let it be empty. You're not failing. You're just landing. Symbolic image. Imagine a mirror. Every time you breathe harder to see yourself more clearly, it fogs up. But when you stop trying, when you let the breath return to its natural rhythm, the mirror clears. You see yourself, not as a performance, but as a presence. Soft question to close this chapter. What if the most lovable version of you is the one who isn't trying? Would you dare to let them be seen? There's a moment that happens quietly, often late at night. You've spent hours thinking, reading, analyzing, gathering insights like fireflies in a jar. And just when you think you've almost figured it out, the jar cracks open, and the darkness feels even bigger than before. The more you know, the more you realize how much you don't. It's unsettling. It makes you wonder if all this seeking has only made the mystery deeper. You've become wiser but somehow more unsure, clearer but less certain, full of knowledge and yet emptier. This is the paradox of awareness. It expands your view, but not always your comfort. We tend to think of knowledge as light, that the more we learn, the brighter the room becomes. But sometimes knowledge casts more shadows. You start to see what others can't. You begin noticing the cracks in conversations, the subtext beneath words, the subtle defenses people build just to survive. You feel things more deeply. You question things more thoroughly. And in a world that thrives on simple answers, that depth can feel isolating. You're not trying to be cynical, you're just awake. But that kind of wakefulness comes with a cost. The Dunning-Kruger effect describes how beginners often overestimate their knowledge, while true experts, the ones with the most awareness, often underestimate theirs. Why? Because the more you truly understand something, the more aware you become of its complexity. The surface gives way to layers, and every layer leads to another question. This is why wisdom often walks hand in hand with humility, and why some of the wisest people you'll ever meet speak softly and question often. They don't cling to their knowing, they let it breathe. Carl Jung once said, enlightenment is not imagining figures of light, but making the darkness conscious. In other words, to truly know is to sit with what cannot be known. It's to resist the temptation of tidy conclusions, to soften into the mystery instead of tightening into control. There's something sacred in that, because not knowing doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're finally honest. And yet that honesty can feel like grief. Grief for the comfort of certainty. Grief for the person you were before you knew better. Grief for how much simpler the world seemed when you didn't see so much. Knowledge opens your eyes, but it doesn't always open your heart right away. Sometimes it pulls you into mental spirals. You start analyzing everything, why you feel this way, why they did that, what it means, what it really means. And your mind never sleeps. This is where intellect can become a defense. If I can just understand it, maybe I can control it. If I can name every pattern, maybe I won't feel so vulnerable. We use analysis like armor, but the heart doesn't speak in data. It speaks in sensation, memory, metaphor. And sometimes the more you intellectualize your pain, the further you drift from feeling it. There's a story in philosophy, the tale of the infinite library. A person walks into a room filled with books. Each one promises the answer. But the more they read, the more rooms appear. Each room leads to another, each shelf to another riddle. Eventually, they realize there is no final page. There is no book that closes the loop. Because the point was never to escape the mystery, but to live with it. Jung called this the process of individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming whole. And wholeness doesn't mean certainty, it means integration. It means holding paradox without needing resolution. It means allowing truth to have layers. It means making peace with not having all the answers, because maybe you were never meant to. Maybe you're meant to become the kind of person who can hold the questions gently. And when the questions become too loud, when the world feels too complex, there's a kind of wisdom in stepping back. Go for a walk without headphones. Look at the moon without naming its phases. Breathe without tracking your breath. Let the moment be what it is. Not a puzzle, not a symbol, not a lesson. Just a pause, just presence. Because the paradox is this: you can know more and feel less alive, or you can know less and feel more wonder. It's not about choosing ignorance, it's about remembering that you are not just a brain, you are a body, a breath, a being. And some truths are felt, not solved. Symbolic image, a candle in a dark room. You light it hoping to see clearly, but the flame flickers. And while it reveals the space around you, it also casts new shadows. You're not failing, you're just seeing more. And the shadows don't mean you're in danger, they mean the room has depth. So maybe tonight, as your thoughts spiral and swell, you can pause the chase, not abandon curiosity, but let it rest. Let yourself be more than a mind, let yourself be mystery too. Soft question to close this chapter. What if the truth isn't something you find, but something that finds you when you stop looking? You've been watching yourself for years. Not consciously at first, but there's always been that second presence inside you. The one who monitors, narrates, checks how you're being perceived. It's the part of you that looks at your smile as you're smiling and wonders, is this how I should look? The part that plays back the conversation right after you leave the room, rehearsing what you said and what you should have said. At first you thought it was just self-awareness, but over time it became something else. A constant observer, a quiet surveillance system, an inner camera that never stops recording. And eventually, you start to forget who you are without it. This is the paradox of observation. The more you watch yourself, the less you feel like yourself. You become split, half living, half performing, half immersed, half adjusting. Even in solitude, you're not quite alone. There's always that gaze, internal, invisible, but deeply felt. And it leaves you wondering, who's really living this life? Is it me or the version of me I think others expect? Psychologically, this can trace back to hypervigilance, a survival mechanism born from environments where being normal wasn't safe. Maybe you were scrutinized too much as a child, or maybe you were ignored and learned to overcorrect by managing your image. You watched others closely, so you could become whatever they needed you to be. And over time, that watching turned inward. Now you do it to yourself, even when no one else is watching. The inner child who once needed to adapt has become the adult who can't stop monitoring. Philip Zimbardo called this phenomenon the observer's split self, a life lived under performance anxiety, where your sense of me becomes tangled in the act of being watched and trying to be watchable. And in the age of social media, this only deepens. You're not just living anymore. You're curating, polishing, reframing. Even your thoughts feel staged sometimes, like they're part of some invisible script you didn't mean to write. But here's the deeper cost. You start to mistrust your own impulses. You hesitate, second guess, lose the thread of your own desires. Because when every action passes through the filter of how will this look, spontaneity dies. And in its place, a hollow form, a performance without a pulse. There's a metaphor in quantum physics, the observer effect. The act of observing a particle can change its behavior. In a strange way, the same thing happens in consciousness. When you become hyper-aware of how you appear, you start adjusting subtly, constantly, until what's left isn't quite you. It's you, distorted through the lens of imagined perception. The camera doesn't just record, it bends. Carl Jung warned against over-identifying with the persona, the mask we wear to function in society. The persona is necessary, but when you forget it's a mask, you mistake it for your face. You think this is me, but it's not. It's the version of you designed to be palatable, predictable, safe. The real you lives underneath messier, quieter, and often softer. So how do we return to that self? It starts with noticing the watcher without letting them drive. It starts with tiny acts of rebellion. Wearing something not because it flatters you, but because it feels like freedom. Speaking without rehearsing. Laughing without checking who's listening. Doing something just because it feels good, not because it earns approval. These aren't small acts, they're sacred ones. They say to the watcher, You're allowed to rest now. I'm safe without your constant guarding. There's an image that repeats in dreams, a mirror that doesn't reflect. At first, it feels like a loss, like you've disappeared. But then, a strange relief. Without the reflection, you begin to feel again. You touch your face and feel warmth. You close your eyes and still exist. You stop needing to be seen, to remember that you're real. And maybe that's the invitation of this paradox. Not to destroy the observer, but to soften them, to thank them for protecting you, to say you don't have to be on duty all the time. You can simply be, not as an image, not as a role, not as a projection, but as a presence, untamed, unscripted, enough. And if you're wondering what that presence feels like, you might not recognize it at first. It feels quieter than you're used to, slower, less impressive maybe, but more true. There's no applause in this space, but there is peace. And in that peace, a reconnection. To your body, to your breath, to the life behind the lens. Symbolic image. Imagine a mirror that refuses to mimic you. You move and it doesn't follow. At first panic, then curiosity, then stillness. You realize you're not meant to be mirrored. You're meant to be felt. And that's something no reflection can hold. Soft question to close this chapter. What part of you is still performing, even in the dark? And who might you become if you gave that part permission to rest? You keep hearing it, just let go, release control, stop holding on. But no one ever tells you how, because the more you try to let go, the tighter you seem to hold on. It becomes another performance, another thing you're supposed to do right. You sit in stillness and ask yourself, am I letting go now? Is this it? But the very act of wondering tightens the grip again. It's like trying to fall asleep by concentrating harder on sleeping. The effort backfires. The surrender becomes control in disguise. And beneath that control is fear. Not just fear of chaos, but fear of what's left when you stop gripping. Fear of the empty space. Fear of the unknown shape your life might take when you stop shaping it. Maybe this isn't about weakness. Maybe this is about survival. Because at some point, holding on saved you to people, to expectations, to routines that numbed you just enough to keep going. And so, letting go, truly letting go, it feels like stepping off a cliff. It's no wonder your body resists. Even when your mind says you're safe now, your nervous system still clings like it's bracing for collapse. You might not realize it, but even healing can become a mask. You start performing surrender, curating softness, saying all the right words about detachment while deep down you're still wrapped in tension. Because there's a part of you, small, quiet, terrified, that believes if I let go, I'll be forgotten. If I let go, I'll dissolve. But what if that isn't the truth? What if the holding on is what's keeping you from being found? Zen masters used to speak in riddles. They'd say, you must let go of letting go, a strange instruction, but one that reveals the trap. Because surrender isn't something you can achieve. It happens when you finally stop trying. Like a feather drifting to earth after resisting every gust. Like breath that returns to its rhythm when you stop noticing it. True release is quiet, not dramatic, not loud, not something you post about or announce. It's the moment you stop fighting the current and realize you're already floating. Sometimes we confuse letting go with giving up, but they're not the same. Giving up is despair, letting go is trust. It's whispering to life, I no longer need to grip you to be whole. There's a bird inside you, not caged but perched. And the door has been open for a long time, but leaving means risking the unknown, so it stays. What would it take to fly? What would it mean to leave the perch? Not because someone told you to, but because something in you remembers. That freedom isn't something earned, it's something remembered. Letting go isn't a finish line, it's a falling, a returning, a melting back into the life that never needed to be forced. You don't need to unlock anything. You don't need to reach some final clarity. Sometimes the softest kind of courage is to simply loosen your fingers, one breath at a time. So tonight, as you lie in the dark, notice what you're still gripping, not to judge it, just to see it. That person, that outcome, that old version of yourself you keep dragging forward like a suitcase full of expired dreams. Ask yourself quietly, what if I put this down? Not forever, just for tonight. What if I stopped performing softness and simply let the stillness find me? If that feels scary, it's okay. Fear means you're close to something true. Just remember, you've already survived the fall. Now you're learning how to land. Let go, not all at once, just enough. to breathe. You say you want peace, stillness, quiet. But when it finally comes, something inside you panics. You lie down at night and the silence grows too loud. The calm feels unfamiliar, and instead of resting, your thoughts start racing. Not because something's wrong, but because nothing is. And that somehow is more unsettling. It's a strange truth. Sometimes peace feels more dangerous than chaos. Because chaos is familiar, you've lived inside it, you've shaped yourself around it. You know its rhythm, its tension, its edge. But peace is a new room, and you don't know where to stand in it. There's no noise to blame, no crisis to solve, no external reason to avoid your own reflection. Just stillness. And for many people, stillness feels like exposure. Because when the world stops spinning, you're left with yourself. And what if you don't know who that is? What if in the quiet, the real questions start to rise? What am I running from? What part of me have I never sat with? When you're constantly moving, you don't have to answer. You can stay in motion and call it purpose. You can stay overwhelmed and call it being needed. But the moment things go quiet, there's nothing left to hide behind. And your nervous system, shaped by years of vigilance, mistakes calm for danger. Because in your story, calm was never neutral. It was the moment before impact, the silence before yelling, the eye of the storm that always broke. So your body braces even when nothing is wrong, especially when nothing is wrong. You startle at rest, you flinch at kindness, you doubt ease. Not because you're broken, but because you've adapted. Because peace is a language your body never learned how to speak. But languages can be learned. And just like a baby doesn't learn to speak by being told to, you won't learn peace by demanding it. You learn it by exposure, by tasting it, in micro moments, in 3 seconds of breath before the mind rushes back in. You learn it by not running, not fixing, not filling every space with noise. And it's uncomfortable. At first, stillness can feel like boredom, like emptiness, like vulnerability. But underneath that discomfort is clarity. Underneath the stillness is the self you've been trying to meet. And she's been waiting, not impatiently, not with judgment, just waiting for you to stop performing, for you to sit down, for you to say, I'm ready to be with what is. And when that moment comes, it might not feel magical. It might feel quiet, like a soft exhale, like space opening in the chest. No music, no fireworks, just breath. The nervous system unhooking, the soul taking off its armor. It's not dramatic, it's not cinematic, but it's real. Peace doesn't mean nothing hurts. It means you're no longer resisting what is. And that is the beginning of healing. Tonight, if you find yourself craving calm but panicking in silence, just notice it. Don't push it away. Don't analyze it. Just let yourself feel the awkwardness of being still. It's okay to not be good at peace yet. You're learning. And learning something new always feels strange at first. But eventually, it becomes home. Eventually, stillness stops being a void and starts being a mirror. You see your reflection, you hold it, and you stay. No more running, no more filling the silence. Just this moment, and the next, and the next. Peace isn't the absence of feeling. It's the presence of wholeness. And you're allowed to have that. You don't need to earn it. You don't need to understand it. You just need to stop resisting it for long enough to let it arrive. And when it does, welcome it like an old friend, like a language your body is finally starting to remember. Even if it trembles, even if it hesitates, that's still peace. That's still healing. That's still you, finally coming home. Becoming who you really are can be the loneliest thing you'll ever do. No one tells you that. They talk about self-love, about growth, about finding yourself. But they don't talk about what you lose. They don't tell you that as you start to hear your own voice more clearly, the noise of the world becomes harder to tolerate. That jokes don't feel funny anymore. That certain friendships go quiet. That rooms you used to belong in start to feel foreign. Because when you begin to change, you stop fitting into the spaces that once held the version of you that didn't know better. And that can feel like abandonment. But the truth is, you're not being abandoned. You're just moving. And not everyone wants to follow you into the deeper parts of yourself. Not because they're bad, not because they don't care, but because your growth forces them to confront their own stagnation. And not everyone is ready for that. So instead of celebrating you, they distance, they mock, they say things like you've changed with a tone that makes it sound like betrayal. And in a way, you have. You're no longer willing to play the role that made other people comfortable at the expense of your truth. And that makes you feel more alone even as you become more whole. This is the loneliness of self-discovery. It's the ache that comes from realizing you can't unknow what you now see. You can't go back to being unaware, even if ignorance was easier. You've stepped onto a path that only you can walk. And some stretches of that road are deeply, unspeakably quiet. But that silence, it's not emptiness, it's space. Space for your soul to breathe without needing to be edited. Space to rebuild, not from habit, but from alignment. There's a part of you, maybe one you've just begun to meet, that isn't afraid of being alone. It's been waiting for this version of you to arrive. And when you sit with that part even briefly, the loneliness softens. Because it's not that you don't belong anywhere anymore. It's that you no longer want to belong where you have to shrink. You no longer want to be celebrated for being digestible. You want to be met where your depth is welcome. And that will happen. But often, not right away. First, you walk through the space between who you were and who you're becoming. And that space is quiet and necessary and sacred. Think of a caterpillar in the chrysalis. It dissolves completely before becoming something new. Not prettier, not more admired. Just different, truer. It can't rush the transformation, and neither can you. Sometimes you sit alone in that shell, questioning everything, missing people who never really saw you, grieving identities that kept you safe even if they weren't real. And it hurts, but it's not wrong. It's the price of honesty, and the gift of becoming. Somewhere along this path, you begin to attract different people. Not because you tried, but because your energy stopped apologizing for itself. And those people, they feel like breath. They speak your unspoken. They meet your stillness without flinching. But until they arrive, you walk alone. Not forever, just for now. Not because you're broken, but because you're rebuilding. And sometimes the scaffolding of your old life has to fall away before the new one can take shape. That's not loneliness, that's alignment. That's clarity. That's the sound of your soul, finally echoing back. Tonight, if you feel the ache of disconnection, don't rush to fix it. Sit in it. Let it show you what you're no longer willing to pretend about. Let it remind you of how far you've come. This isn't the end of your story. It's the chapter where you meet yourself fully, quietly, without interference. And you are not alone in that, even if it feels that way. Others are walking the same road, in different bodies, in different cities, but under the same sky. And one day, you'll recognize each other by the way you no longer shrink. There's a strange thing that happens when you try to outrun something. Eventually you become it. You tell yourself, I'll never be like them. I'll never be cold or passive or controlling. I'll never be weak. And you build yourself in reaction to that vow. You craft your voice, your values, your identity, not from what you love, but from what you fear. And without realizing it, you orbit the very thing you swore you'd never become. That's the paradox of identity. You become what you're trying to avoid. Because resistance is still a form of attachment. It still points you toward the thing you're focused on, even if you're running the other way. And the more you define yourself by opposition, the less you know what you truly are. You're just a shadow with a name. You're not leading your life, you're reacting to someone else's. Maybe it was a parent, a past relationship, a version of yourself you've tried to bury. But the more you define yourself in reaction to them, the more tightly they remain bound to you. It's like running in a circle, convinced it's a straight line, until you find yourself back where you started, only more exhausted. Carl Jung described this dynamic through the concept of the shadow. All the qualities we disown, reject, or judge in others, eventually they begin to show up in us. Not because we're failures, but because what we resist persists. And the parts of us we exile don't disappear. They wait. In silence, in dreams, in the tones of our voice when we're tired, in the way we treat others when we think no one's watching. And sometimes, in the quiet moments when we realize we've become the very thing we once hated. But this isn't punishment, it's reflection. It's life showing you what's still unintegrated. What you fight outside of yourself still lives inside of you. And healing isn't about denial. It's about returning with softness. It's about asking, what am I afraid will happen if I stop resisting this part of me? Because often what we resist isn't the trait itself. It's the meaning we've given it. You fear weakness not because it's weak, but because you once felt unsafe when you were vulnerable. You fear anger not because it's dangerous, but because someone once used it to hurt you. You fear control not because it's power, but because you saw power misused. And so you reject these parts in others, and in yourself. But all that rejection leaves holes. And those holes ache So you cover them with masks, with ideals, with rules for how you must be always. You say things like, I'm the strong one, I'm the funny one, I'm the calm one. And slowly, you become a role instead of a self. Until one day you feel numb, disconnected, tired from holding up the mask. Because you weren't meant to be a role. You were meant to be real. You were meant to contain contradictions, to be soft and strong, messy and aware, brave and afraid. You don't need to fix that. You need to allow it. Because when you finally stop resisting, you return to something honest. You stop building yourself in reaction to pain and start building from intention. You stop asking, what don't I want to be? And you start asking, what do I value even when no one's watching? That shift is everything. It doesn't come all at once. It comes in layers. It comes in breakdowns and quiet epiphanies, in long walks, in bad dreams, in soft mornings where you finally tell yourself the truth. It comes when you forgive yourself for who you became to survive. And it deepens when you choose who you now want to become, not in opposition, but in alignment. You don't need to be a reaction. You can be a creation. Something new, something conscious, something not shaped by what hurt you, but by what calls you forward. So tonight, if you feel like you're becoming something you never wanted to be, pause. Don't shame yourself. Trace it. Where did that trait begin? Who modeled it for you? What did you have to suppress in yourself to avoid it? And what part of you might still be waiting to be met? It's not too late. You haven't become a monster. You're just a person with a history and a choice. And that choice starts now. There's a kind of pain that feels almost comforting. Not because it's good, not because it heals, but because it's familiar. You know how to navigate it. You know where it begins, where it leads, what it whispers when it returns at night. It's the ache that says, you're still not enough. The tightness in your chest when you expect disappointment and find it. The reflex that pulls you back from joy before it has a chance to land. And even though you say you want peace, some part of you clings to the pain. Because it's safer than the unknown. You've built a life around anticipating the worst. And somewhere along the way, it started to feel like home. Not because it nourishes you, but because it doesn't surprise you. And that predictability feels like protection. There's a concept in trauma psychology called the emotional home. It means that whatever emotional state you experience most consistently as a child becomes the state your nervous system seeks in adulthood. Even if it's painful, even if it's lonely, even if it hurts you again and again. Because your body equates familiarity with safety. So if you grew up surrounded by criticism, you might feel uneasy around praise. If you were raised in chaos, stillness feels like danger. If love was inconsistent, consistency now feels suspicious. And so you recreate the pain, not because you want to, but because your system believes it's what you need to survive. You go back to what feels known, to the same dynamics, the same stories, the same patterns in new disguises. And when people ask why you don't have an answer, but deep down part of you whispers, at least I know how to hurt here. Because healing requires unfamiliarity. It requires stepping into joy that doesn't come with a warning label. It requires resting in love that doesn't demand you shapeshift. And that strangely can feel unsafe. There's a reason some people sabotage their own peace, not because they're broken, but because the peace feels too quiet, too new, too real. It doesn't match the emotional template burned into their bones. So they reach for what they know, the pain that has rhythm, the ache they can hum along with. You can see this most clearly in moments of success, moments when things finally feel good, and instead of leaning in, you pull away, you overthink, you start a fight, you numb out. Because joy doesn't feel like home, not yet, but it can. Not all at once, but gradually. By noticing the reflex to return to pain and gently choosing something different. Not forcing it, not pretending to be ready. Just softening, just staying. It might start with one deep breath you don't cut short. With letting someone's compliment land without deflecting it. With resting when your mind says you haven't earned it. It might feel awkward, fake even. But that's how healing feels at first. Like wearing shoes that aren't broken in yet. Like sleeping in a bed that doesn't smell like your past. Like living in a nervous system that's learning it no longer needs to brace for impact. You'll want to go back. To the rooms where pain lives. To the people who speak your old language of hurt. To the version of you that only knows how to survive. But you don't have to stay there. You can walk out. You can stand at the threshold shaking unsure and still take one step forward. Into discomfort that liberates. instead of pain that repeats. Tonight, if you notice yourself reaching for something that hurts, ask gently, what feeling am I trying to recreate? And is there something kinder that I'm ready to begin recognizing as home? It takes time, but time is your ally, and safety is not a place, it's a practice. One that starts when you stop choosing what's familiar and start choosing what's real. Even if it's quiet, even if it's strange, even if it asks you to trust joy before you fully believe in it. Because joy will wait, peace will wait, wholeness will wait, until you're ready. And even if you're not, you can begin anyway. You're always trying to catch up. To something, to someone, to some invisible standard that keeps moving just as you get close. You fill your days with lists. You measure your worth by how much you accomplish. You call it ambition, productivity, responsibility. But underneath it all, there's a quiet panic. As if time is slipping through your fingers. As if you're running out of something even if you don't know what. And the faster you move, the more behind you feel. This is the paradox of time. The more you chase it, the more it slips away. It's like sand. The tighter you try to hold it, the faster it runs between your hands. You look at the clock and feel it watching you back. You wake up tired, you go to bed wired, you count the hours, the minutes, the seconds, but rarely feel present in any of them. Because presence can't exist where pressure lives. And when every moment is weighed against what you should be doing, you're not living time, you're performing it. You rush through the morning, you race through the day, you collapse into night wondering where it all went. And in that constant motion, you miss the very thing you're chasing. Your life. Your actual breathing life with its slow pauses, its silent wonder, its tiny moments that aren't optimized or monetized or shared. Just felt. But feeling requires stillness. And stillness threatens the part of you that believes your worth is tied to movement. That if you slow down, you'll fall behind. That if you stop, the world will forget you. But time doesn't reward speed, it rewards presence. It stretches for the ones who honor it. It expands in silence, in slowness, in awe. Think of the longest minute of your life. It wasn't when you were rushing. It was when you were feeling something deeply. Grief, joy, fear, love. Those minutes held entire universes. And they didn't require a schedule. They required presence. There's an old thought experiment called Zeno's paradox. It suggests that motion is an illusion that between every step there are infinite halfway points, that we never truly arrive. In a strange way, that's how we live. Always in pursuit, always mid-step, always chasing the next halfway point. But what if you stopped running? Not because you've caught up, but because there's nothing to catch. What if time isn't something to conquer, but something to be in relationship with, to greet, to thank, to soften into? Maybe you don't need more time. Maybe you need less pressure. Maybe you need to stop measuring your life by what you produce and start feeling it by how you inhabit each moment. Not every second needs to be filled. Not every day needs to be efficient. You can lose an hour to watching light shift on the wall. You can spend an afternoon walking with no destination. You can stop mid-sentence and say, let's just sit. That's not wasting time. That's reclaiming it. That's remembering that you are not a machine. You're a being. And beings don't chase time. They live inside it. Tonight, if your thoughts are racing ahead to tomorrow, to deadlines, to things undone, just breathe. You are here, not late, not behind, not broken. You are here, and here is enough. Let the clock keep ticking. You don't need to catch it. You only need to come home to this moment and let it hold you. You want to know who you are. You stare into mirrors, literal and metaphorical, hoping they'll reflect something true. A sign, a definition, a self you can hold on to. But the longer you look, the more distorted it becomes. You start adjusting, tilting your head, fixing your posture, curating your expression even when you're alone, as if the reflection is a test, as if it holds the verdict of your existence. But it never quite satisfies, because the more you try to see yourself clearly, the more you lose sight of who you are. That's the paradox. The mirror doesn't just reflect, it performs. It shows you not just how you appear, but how you think you should appear. And in that gap between perception and presence, your identity begins to bend. You become a version of yourself you can observe, but not inhabit. An image, a role, a shape designed to be seen, but not necessarily lived. You start to believe that self-awareness means self-clarity, but it doesn't. Sometimes it creates a hall of mirrors, each reflection slightly off, each one pulling you further from your center. You become fluent in how to appear real, while forgetting how to feel real. This isn't vanity. This isn't ego. This is survival. Because being seen for many of us has always been tied to being safe. If they see me as acceptable, I won't be rejected. If I present well, I'll be loved. If I look okay, I am okay. But looking okay isn't the same as being okay. And the more you equate the two, the more fragile your sense of self becomes. You start depending on reflection, on feedback, on recognition, on validation to remember who you are. And when the mirror disappears, when no one is watching, you feel lost, like a signal without a receiver. But there's a deeper truth. You are not meant to be understood through reflection. You are not a surface. You are a presence, a hum beneath the image, a living truth that can't be flattened into a role. Carl Jung spoke of the self as something far deeper than the ego or persona. He believed the true self isn't what the world sees. It's what the soul knows. And the soul doesn't care how you look. It cares how you feel, how you move, how you soften, how you stay. And the soul can't be seen in a mirror. It can only be felt when the mirrors go dark. Sometimes that's why life brings silence, why relationships fade, why recognition slips away. Not to punish you, but to return you to yourself, to wean you off reflection, to remind you that you don't need to be seen to be real. There's a dream people have when they're searching for identity. They walk into a room of mirrors looking for themselves, but every mirror shows someone else's version of them, a parent's, a partner's, a critic's. Finally, they find one mirror that's blank, and in that blankness, they begin to feel. It's terrifying at first, no image to hold on to, no performance to maintain, but then it becomes a doorway, a return to presence, not as something observed, but something lived. You're allowed to stop performing, even for yourself. You're allowed to not know who you are sometimes, to feel blurry, unfinished, uncertain. That's not a crisis, that's a clearing, an invitation to feel your way into being, instead of trying to define yourself into existence. Tonight, if you find yourself analyzing again, trying to understand yourself by pulling at every thread, pause. Come back to your body, to your breath, to the sensation of being alive in this moment without needing to observe it. Let the mirror fog over. Let the image disappear. Let the truth rise from inside, not outside. You are not a reflection. You are a presence. And presence doesn't need to be seen to exist. It only needs to be lived. You are always trying to improve, to grow, to become something more. More calm, more focused, more loving, more free. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's beautiful, even this instinct to reach. But if you listen closely beneath that striving is a whisper that says, you are not enough yet. So you chase, you journal, you reflect, you read every book, watch every video, dig into every flaw like it's a wound that needs fixing. And you call it healing. You call it becoming. But what if in the process of always becoming, you're forgetting how to be? That's the paradox. The more obsessed you are with growth, the more disconnected you become from who you already are. You're so focused on the next version of you that you never actually meet the one that's here now. And that version, she's exhausted. Not from laziness, but from always feeling like a project, like something to improve, upgrade, optimize. You've turned yourself into a task, a self-development blueprint. And in the name of self-love, you've made your presence conditional, only worthy if it's improving. But your worth doesn't live in your future. It's not hiding in some perfected version of yourself. It lives here, now, in the parts of you that are still messy, still healing, still human. Alfred Adler once said we move toward imagined goals, fictional endpoints that give us meaning. But those goals can become cages, because every time you get close, the goalpost shifts. And what was once enough becomes the new, not yet. So you stay in motion, endlessly becoming, rarely arriving. It's like climbing a staircase that loops back to its base. You think you're making progress, but you're really just circling an idea of who you should be. Meanwhile, the you that is the one breathing, hurting, hoping right now waits for permission to be loved. Not for who you'll become, but for who you already are. And maybe that's the work now. Not becoming better, but becoming present. Not seeking clarity, but sitting in what's here. Let the future unfold. Let the goals exist. But stop turning yourself into a finish line. You were never meant to be a destination. You were meant to be experienced. Tonight, you don't have to grow. You don't have to heal. You don't have to optimize this moment. You just have to meet it. Let yourself be unfinished, unresolved, whole anyway. Let the spiral slow, let the breath settle. Let the version of you that exists now be enough not as a checkpoint, but as a companion. The one who's walked you through every fire, every failure, every silent night you weren't sure you'd survive. She's not broken, she's brave. She's not behind, she's becoming. And she's already whole. Not because she's done growing, but because she's real. You don't have to keep proving your worth by what you achieve. You are not a performance, you are not a project. You are a presence, you are a pulse, you are a soft inhale in the dark, and that's more than enough. You want to be seen, truly seen, not just noticed, but known, felt, understood in the quiet places you've never put into words. But when the moment comes when someone looks at you too long, listens too closely, gets too close to something raw, you pull away. You change the subject. You laugh it off. You retreat behind a smile that says, "I'm fine." This is the paradox. You long to be seen, but hide at the same time. You crave connection but fear exposure. You want to be understood but don't want to be studied. Because somewhere along the way, being seen stopped feeling safe. Maybe it was a parent who misunderstood your softness, a friend who turned your secrets into ammunition, a moment when vulnerability became a weapon used against you. So you learned to protect yourself, to reveal just enough to seem open, but never enough to feel truly vulnerable. You became skilled at hiding in plain sight. You know how to be likable, how to keep people close without letting them all the way in, how to perform openness without surrendering anything real. And maybe it works. People call you warm, easy to talk to, grounded. But inside, you feel like a locked room, and the loneliness grows louder, even in a crowded life. Because connection without depth feels like standing in sunlight that never reaches your skin. It looks warm, but you stay cold. Carl Jung called this the mask, the persona, the part of us that interacts with the world crafted carefully for acceptance. But if you wear it too long, you forget there's a face underneath, a soul that wants more than applause. It wants resonance. And resonance only happens when you show something real. But showing yourself requires risk, and risk threatens the illusion of safety. So you play the in-between. Seen, but not revealed. Open, but guarded. Honest, but edited. And the longer you live there, the more invisible you become. Not because others can't see you, but because you're not showing them anything true. There's a kind of grief in that. A slow erosion of intimacy, a quiet heartbreak that doesn't come from rejection, but from never letting yourself be accepted in the first place. Because they can't love what you won't let them see. And you can't feel loved if you're always performing. But it's not hopeless. You don't have to rip the mask off all at once. You can start small. You can practice. You can let someone see you hesitate. Let your voice tremble in a story that matters. Let your truth slip through in a moment that isn't polished. And when you do, watch what happens. Some will flinch. They won't know how to hold it. That's okay. But others, they'll soften. They'll meet you in the unguarded space, and suddenly you're not performing anymore. You're connecting. And the part of you that's been hiding for so long finally breathes. There's an image of a lighthouse in the fog, beautiful but dimmed, not because it's broken, but because it's afraid of being too bright. But the ships still sail past, searching, waiting. They don't need perfection. They need a signal, something honest, something real. You don't have to shine all the time, but you do have to show up, as you are, even if the light flickers. Tonight, if you feel the ache of being unseen, ask yourself gently, what part of me have I been hiding, and what might happen if I let it speak? Not to everyone, just to one soul, just once. And if no one is there yet, let that part speak to you. Look in the mirror, not to judge, not to pose, but to witness. Say to yourself, I see you, and mean it. Because being seen starts here, in this stillness, in this breath, in this soft, unfiltered truth that doesn't need permission. You don't have to hide anymore. You're allowed to be known. You've had dreams that felt more real than waking life. Moments when everything made sense in a way it never does during the day. Where people who are gone return without explanation. Where time bends and gravity softens and you understand something not with your mind, but with your whole being. Then you wake up, and the understanding vanishes. The meaning slips through your fingers like mist. You try to remember, but there are no words for it, only a feeling. A quiet ache that says, you touched something true. But here's the paradox, even in your sleep you're dreaming of waking up. You long for clarity, for something real. You seek it in your sleep because you don't feel it in your day. And sometimes, You wonder if the dream is more honest than the world you return to. Maybe the version of you in the dream, unafraid, unmasked, untangled, is the one closer to your truth. You wake up and play roles, answer to your name, carry out routines. But some part of you watches from a distance wondering, is this real? Or am I sleepwalking through a life I didn't choose? This is the dreamer's dilemma. You seek awakening, but you don't know what you'll find when you open your eyes fully. Because awakening isn't peaceful at first. It's disorienting. You start to see the systems you live inside, the patterns you inherited, the identities you wear like borrowed clothes. And it can feel like you're breaking, but really, you're peeling back layers. You're remembering that life isn't supposed to feel this numb, that present is supposed to taste like something. So you keep dreaming, not to escape, but to access a language the waking world forgot. In dreams, you feel your own emotions more vividly. You listen without interruption. You explore without judgment. No one's grading you there. No one's asking for productivity. You just are. And maybe that's the key. Maybe you don't need to chase awakening as a goal. Maybe you need to feel into it like a slow return, a remembering. That underneath your roles, your defenses, your strategies, you are still dreaming. And the dream isn't a lie, it's a doorway. Jung believed that dreams carry messages from the unconscious, not random, not chaotic, but deeply meaningful. Symbols from the soul. And often the dream is not just trying to show you something, it's trying to wake you. Not to jolt you, but to gently stir your awareness to remind you that you're more than what you perform, more than your habits, more than your past. You are the one watching the dream, and the one dreaming it. Both. Tonight as you drift, don't resist the dreams. Don't silence them. They're not nonsense. They're not broken thoughts. They are you trying to speak to you in the only language you haven't filtered. Let them say what they need to say. Let the impossible happen. Let time bend. Let people return. Let doors appear where there were none. And when you wake, don't dismiss the dream. Ask it, what were you trying to show me? And ask yourself, what if I'm still dreaming now? Not as a metaphor, as a real question. What if this life you think you understand, the stories you tell yourself about who you are and what's possible are just another layer? And what if you could wake from that too? Not to escape, but to choose. To open your eyes and say, I want to live this life awake. Not on autopilot, not half here, but fully, deliberately, softly. You can't force awakening, but you can welcome it. With each breath, each pause, each moment of seeing through the surface. So tonight dream, not to leave your life behind, but to remember the truth inside it. And tomorrow, when you open your eyes, don't just wake up. Wake into. You've been looking for closure, an ending that makes sense, a final truth that ties everything together. You think, if I could just understand, maybe I could rest. If I could just figure it out, maybe the ache would stop. But here's the paradox. The more you search for an end, the more the questions multiply. You chase resolution and it moves further away. You seek peace through answers and find only more complexity. Because life doesn't resolve, it unfolds. And meaning isn't something you catch. It's something you meet and then meet again differently each time. Still, you keep seeking, not out of obsession, but because you've been told that answers bring peace. But some questions were never meant to be answered. They were meant to be carried, held softly, listened to, not solved. You want to know why things happened the way they did, why they left, why it didn't work out, why you are the way you are. You want someone to hand you a sentence that makes it all make sense. But maybe the truth is quieter than that. Maybe it's not a sentence. Maybe it's a sigh. Maybe the answer isn't clarity, but acceptance. That this happened, that you're here, that you're still unfolding. Viktor Frankl wrote that meaning isn't found in the search for happiness, but in the way we choose to meet our suffering. That meaning arises not from the answers, but from the posture we take toward the unknown. You don't have to love the pain, but you can honor what it taught you. You can say, I don't know why, but I'm still here. And maybe that's enough. Because sometimes the pursuit of answers becomes a way to avoid grief, a way to delay the real work, which is feeling, which is letting go of the version of you who needed things to make sense, and embracing the version of you who is brave enough to live without guarantees. The map you've been drawing doesn't lead to a finish line. It leads to more questions, more wonder, more turning toward yourself in moments of doubt and saying, I'm still listening. Maybe you've been seeking the end because you thought it would bring relief, but maybe it's the seeking itself that's tiring you out. Maybe what you really want isn't closure, it's rest. Not from life, but from trying to master it. There's a beauty in surrendering the need to arrive, in realizing that meaning can come from movement, from small rituals, from unspoken things. A cup of tea held with both hands, a kind word given without agenda, a memory that softens over time not because it was explained, but because it was honored. Tonight, if you're still trying to solve it all, still searching for the perfect answer to set you free, pause. What if there is no final answer? What if there is only presence? And what if presence is where peace has been waiting all along? You can close the book without knowing how the story ends. You can breathe even if you don't understand why it hurts so much. You can rest, even in the middle. There's a symbol for this, a map with no compass, no legend, just paths, just terrain. You are not lost. You're just walking. And walking is enough. Let yourself be unfinished. Let yourself be a question. And trust that the asking is its own kind of answer. Maybe the point was never to understand. Maybe it was simply to sit with it all, the paradoxes, the contradictions, the beautiful confusion of being alive, to breathe inside the not knowing, and still feel whole. You've wandered through so many layers tonight, not to arrive anywhere, but to remember something your mind may have forgotten. That truth doesn't always come wrapped in clarity. Sometimes it comes wrapped in stillness. You are not here to be solved. You are not a riddle. You are a presence, a quiet unfolding, a breath between dreams. And if some part of you is still searching, still reaching for the next insight, still hoping for something more, that's okay. Let that part rest too. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not broken for needing time. You're simply here, and here is enough. Tonight you gave yourself space to soften, to reflect, to wonder. And even if your mind kept moving, even if your eyes stayed open, something in you drifted. And that matters. So close your eyes now if they're not closed already. Let the thoughts fade. Let the questions dissolve. No need to hold anything. No need to figure anything out. You made it. Not to an ending, but to a pause. And in this pause, you are safe. End of script. Drift gently and I'll meet you in the next thought.